Thanks for being here with me today. I'm Matthew Hadodo presenting on the Istanbul Greek variety, which I had presented on the 13th of October, and specifically looking at guise experiments in contrast with ethnographic methods for the enregisterment of the Istanbul Greek variety. So not much, unfortunately, has been written on Istanbul Greek, in part due to how small the population has become. There's only about 2,000 indigenous Greeks left in Turkey as a result of geopolitical policies over the past century. And what that means is that there's been a huge diaspora of Greeks, of Istanbul Greeks throughout the world, but not necessarily with the same recognition that they used to have, let's say, a few hundred years ago. And while they're an indigenous group, they're no longer, or they've never rather been a homogenous group or a monolithic group. There's been Greek movement and settlement in Istanbul since before the Byzantine Empire, during the Ottoman Empire, and even in the current Republic of Turkey. And as a result of Istanbul Greeks occupying sort of different social positions throughout the rise and fall and current status of Istanbul, they've been in contact with lots of other language speakers and people of different backgrounds. Obviously with Turkish and Turks, but also with the other minoritized communities of Istanbul, such as French speakers, Italians, Armenians, and Ladino-speaking Sephardic Jews. And in fact, anthropologists that have looked at the Istanbul Greek community in Greece has said that this idea of cosmopolitanism is a very important way for Istanbul Greeks to differentiate themselves from the local mainland Greeks. So for those of you less aware, here's a map of modern-day Turkey with Istanbul and the insert. And my fieldwork has been taking me to both the European and Asian sides of the city, as well as the Prince Islands off the Asian coast. So as I mentioned, I had done some field work there. I'm actually a heritage speaker of the variety. My mother was born into the Istanbul Greek community, which is actually really important because it's a very closed off group and they tend to not be very comfortable being interviewed, especially by outsiders. And so ultimately I was able to recruit quite a few participants, over 80 in Istanbul and 30 Istanbul Greeks that relocated in Greece as part of a larger ethnographic, sociolinguistic ethnography. So nothing had previously been really written on Istanbul Greek, so part of my work was really just to document and describe the variety, which included elicitation tasks, word lists, and so on, but also as a sociolinguist really interested in the social meaning of variation, getting at metapragmatic discourse, and in other projects I've looked at sociophonetic acoustic analysis with this discourse analysis as well, to get at other questions related to attitudes and ideologies of language and identity. So, and in fact, in current other research, I've borne out how the Istanbul Greeks discursively recruit linguistic features to do differentiation work, right? So there's this enregisterment of a standard Greek speaker and an Istanbul Greek speaker based on the Istanbul Greeks' experiences, which is not necessarily how other people view standard Greek speakers or Greece, but this is what's locally meaningful for the Istanbul Greek community. Based on lots of different features, including linguistic as well as the social ones seen on the other slide. Now, there are many, many features found in what I call the Istanbul Greek linguistic repertoire or series of repertoires, but some of the more salient ones include velarized laterals. Standard Greek doesn't velarize. They have clear la la li la lu, let's say. But in Istanbul, there's an allophonic process in which before back vowels, they're velarized to la, le, li, lo, lu. This is also found in other varieties of Greek in the northern parts of the region. But there's also this phonetic change of coronal affricates from ts to ch and the voiced versions of them too. There are as far as I know, there isn't really this type of a phenomenon in other Greek varieties. There are post-alveolar affricates in southeastern varieties, including Cypriot, but that actually is an allophone of velars before front vowels, so a very different phonological context. And there's many other features that are found. And as a result, Istanbul Greeks do this differentiation work based on the social as well as the linguistic as well as broader sociocultural differences. But many of them told me, they reported in interviews that they get often mistaken for being from northern Greece, presumably due to the velarized laterals as well as certain morphosyntactic features. But then sometimes are also mistaken for Cypriot, and that's presumably due to the post-alveolar affricates, despite being corresponding to different contexts, as well as other morphosyntactic features that are more in common with those varieties. So they're all different varieties with very, very different language ecologies, which led me to ask, well then, if Istanbul Greek is an enregistered variety or series of repertoires that Istanbul Greek speakers view as being more cosmopolitan, as opposed to Standard Greek being this more relaxed or impolite sort of a thing, then will other Greek speakers make the same sort of evaluations? Will they be able to even recognize Istanbul Greek, since the community doesn't have the same presence that it once did? And are they going to apply the same social meanings for these forms for the different speakers? So I decided to do a verbal guise, and based on recordings I had done in both Istanbul and Athens, I took 4 men and 4 women, half corresponding to Istanbul Greeks, half being Standard Greek speakers that I interviewed in Athens, all in their 30s at the time of recording, about 30-second long clips from their interviews where they were discussing travel, trips, vacations, holidays, and the like, in order to elicit certain features, such as laterals, affricates, and other phonetic, lexical, different types of linguistic structure that can possibly aid in identification, so that we can get to questions related to cosmopolitan versus villager, sort of attributes, as well as other characteristics too. So ultimately, I used Qualtrics to do an online survey, completely in Greek. After consent terms, participants were presented randomly one of the 8 speakers, asked to listen to the recording, and then using a 10-point scale, rated 8 different characteristics. The following page, they were asked to replay that same clip, and then in open field, provide their best guess where they think the speaker's from and what from their speech made them think that. That was to sort of approximate Montgomery Moore's click task, which hopefully I'll be able to do. It's currently in beta, but I think we'll be able to soon get that translated into Greek. And then at the very end, participants had to provide basic demographic information, including to what extent they have any connection to Istanbul or Istanbul Greeks, and how they think Istanbul Greek speakers actually talk. So ultimately, I had 74 Greek-speaking participants, 25 men, 49 women, 27 of whom had some familiarity with Istanbul Greeks, 7 of whom were in fact Istanbul Greek, a wide range of ages, and mostly skewed to higher education. So what were the results? Well, Istanbul Greek speakers were very accurate in placing other Istanbul Greek speakers. Only one Istanbul Greek speaker was guessed to be more inconsistent, to sometimes be Standard Greek or otherwise. Those who were not familiar with Istanbul Greek did not correctly place them. They thought they were either Northern Greek, Cypriot, Islander, foreign born, etc. And although one Istanbul Greek speaker was perceived by different raters as Standard Greek, no Standard Greek speaker was ever perceived to be Istanbul Greek, although sometimes they were guessed to be otherwise. Because I had these 8 different characteristics that I was looking at, in order to consolidate, what I did was I ran a principal component analysis to consolidate these features based on Levon et al. And after running the PCA, there were 3 PCs that were found. And after rotation, the first one corresponding to likability, the second one corresponding to toughness, and the third one corresponding to cosmopolitanism. So we'll focus on the first and the third ones here. And then to run the statistical analysis, what we did was use these as the dependent variables. So spoiler alert, not much was actually significant, but after running the first model, looking at likability, what we saw was that actually for any model, age and gender, whether for the speaker or the rater, had no significance. And Istanbul Greek speakers were rated as slightly more likable than Standard Greek speakers. And when we look at the individual speakers, what we see speakers 1, 3, and 6, and 7, who are actually Istanbul Greek, it's really speaker 6 in particular that's boosting that, probably because he was laughing for a few seconds in his clip, which maybe that influenced it, because maybe people think that people who laugh are more likable. Something for us to explore. But then when we're looking at the cosmopolitan component, what we see is that Standard Greek speakers actually rated much more cosmopolitan than Istanbul Greek speakers, which is the opposite of how Istanbul Greek is enregistered, which alludes to or suggests at the very least that there's some kind of anything non-standard like is treated as less sophisticated, we can say. However, after looking at interactions in the data, what we see are that the Istanbul Greek raters actually rated Istanbul Greek speakers as more cosmopolitan than Standard Greek speakers, and they also more so than the Standard Greek raters viewed Istanbul Greek speakers. So what that tells us then is a few different things. In terms of looking at theory more broadly, what we can see is that the salience is playing a role, right? So the laterals are salient due to this greater acoustic divergence, involvement in phonological processes, as has been said in the literature. The affricates are less salient for Istanbul Greeks, although it does come up as part of the commentary less frequently. But it's more salient for Cypriot because that's part of an allophonic change, or that's part of a different allophonic distribution. And so speakers that are aware of different varieties, such as Cypriot, which is very part of a broader sort of Greek consciousness, then that's also contributing to these sorts of associations that are being made. And as a result, people are applying their sort of experiences with these different phones. And what the speakers are doing is exactly just that, using their own experience. So even though certain features may be the same or sounding the same, they don't carry the same social meaning. It makes us really reconsider what is enregistered and for whom. And also that minoritized and stigmatized speakers negotiate these standardized language ideologies too, but they maybe are borne out differently. And that's what we see both in the ethnography as well as in the guise experiment. So moving forward, attitudinal research would benefit potentially from recruiting participants from different backgrounds, because if we looked at just the ethnographic component, we would have a very specific understanding of what Greek varieties are looking like in terms of attitudes. And then if we just did the guise, we would have had a different understanding of that. But having both together made us do that interaction, for example, which gave us a very specific outcome. So I thank you for your time and hope you have a great rest of your, well, it's the 29th of October. So enjoy November or whenever you're watching this. Thanks.